Great. Thank you for the organizers for inviting us for this opportunity. My name is Tony Lee. I'm presenting on behalf of MEDIPOST. We're a Korean-based cell therapy developer company dealing with cord blood-derived allogeneic stem cell MSC therapy. Sorry about the font issue there. We are actually running a cord blood bank on the far left-hand side of the screen. You can see annual turnover about $30 million fee for service. And we've actually got a BLA-approved commercial product in Korea, brand name CARTISTEM. Sorry about the font there. That has been approved with full BLA in 2012. I'm going to show you some clinical data on that as we are really addressing highly unmet need of knee osteoarthritis. And we're doing our manufacturing at our own GMP facility in the middle of the screen, located in Seoul, Korea, that's supplying our commercial products in Korea, as well as the clinical development efforts and clinical material for the Japan trial. And we've got some CDMO service, as well as a subsidiary company working on the immune cells, again, leveraging allogeneic cord blood-derived immune cells there. On the far right-hand side, you see subsidiaries that we operate directly under as wholly owned subsidiaries, both in the United States here, based in Boston, and also in Tokyo, in Japan. We have 50% ownership of OmniaBio CDMO, CGT Specialty CDMO, in partnership with CCRM in Canada. So here are the some clinical stage pipelines. On the left-hand side, we have a red box. That's a CARTISTEM. I'm going to show you some clinical data on that. That is OA asset, commercialized in Korea since 2012. And then a couple of other pipelines there, Pneumostem and Neurostem. I'm not going to go into details there. BPD orphan, pediatric orphan indication, as well as Alzheimer's, both at phase 2 stage, and some preclinical work there. And the SMOB is another platform that we actually select a highly functional subpopulation of HUCB-derived MSCs, SMUPIA. That's an injectable early-stage knee-OA asset at phase 2 stage. On the right-hand side, we've got preclinical programs focusing on allogeneic, as I mentioned, UCB-derived immune cells, focusing on regulatory T cells and NK cells. But our heavy focus is really on the musculoskeletal knee-OA program. As you can see at the bottom of the screen there, this is targeting knee-OA, regardless of the age, and I'll show you clinical data that's really addressing a very highly unmet need in global markets. In Korea, as I said, we're currently selling about 4,500 doses every year since the approval in 2012. In Japan, we are wrapping up phase 3 trial, about to apply BLA application next year, this time next year, by end of next year, actually. And then following year, hopefully we get the approval there. Phase 3 will start end of this year, in January next year, in the US, as well as the injectable pipeline at the bottom there has completed phase 1 and phase 2 in South Korea, going into phase 3 from next year. So the OA, as most of you will know, a very, very significant market size. And really, you know, there's increasing population suffering with knee OA. That is due to aging, obesity, etc. And people are really looking for, you know, lifestyle, quality of life, and they're really a big demand and significant out-of-pocket interest there, as well as a big need for innovative therapy such as ours. And this is a so-called treatment gap. On the left-hand side, you'll see typical injectables as you start going into this patient journey, so to speak. You have HA, steroids, NSAIDs, and then, you know, after a little while, that really don't work, and you go into a number of years of this increasing pathology with OA. And then terminally on the far right-hand side, the other really alternative option is to get total knee arthroplasty, which is knee replacement, and then that has got some significant drawbacks, you know, not to mention a significant range of motion issues, side effects, but also lifespan as well of that implant, no more than 15, maximum 20 years. So you really don't want to get that until you're so-called old enough, so that the significant gap exists in that sort of a treatment there. And what we're trying to do is really to bridge that gap by having two complementary assets. One on the right-hand side, the red arrow, that is the CARTISTEM, that's a commercial product. I'm going to show you some data. On the left-hand side, that's an early-stage injectable that actually prevents progression of the OA disease, whereas on the right-hand side, you've gone through that mid to late-stage, advanced OA stage, then we do a surgical intervention, and then really remodeling and then regeneration of cartilage, regardless of patient's age. So this is a product. We have this product in two components. One API is a live cells, which is cord blood-derived MSCs. We do this in manufacturing at a drug substance stage where the bulk and the stock is frozen down. But as we release the final product, we do a final passage culture, and the cells are released in a live cell state. Therefore, a relatively short shelf life of 48 hours to about 72 hours, depending on the CMC that we've developed. And the second component, the larger glass vial, contains freeze-dried hyaluronic acid as a biopolymer. You mix the two together into hydrogel, and then that's surgically implanted. And the big strategy statement for us is really to bridge that gap between the patients who are roughly in the 40 to 50 years of age to about 70 years of age. We actually don't want too young to get total knee arthroplasty, but there's really no other available therapy for these patients. And that age limit is really critical. And as well as the cartilage defect or damaged area that can be really small as 2 to 3 square centimeters. In our case, going right up to 9 square centimeters, whereby the dose of the product is shown in the photo actually can cover up to 3 square centimeters of size defect, and 6 needed 2 doses, up to 9, then you need 3 doses, but all surgically implanted in the same manner. So this has been approved and launched in South Korea since 2012, and this is a sales graph. And we've been growing very, very strongly, particularly in the past 10 years or so. And we're currently doing around about, as I said, 4,500 doses. We're close to 35,000 patients accumulative since the launch, and close to 40,000 doses. Again, because of some patients needing more than 1 dose, as more doses been released than patient number. In top-line revenue in Korean market, currently doing annually about $18 million. And then it's about across about 600, 650 clinics and hospitals within South Korea. This is available. So this is an orthopedic surgical product. The live cell components are released to orthopedic surgeons at the operating room, and this is how it's implanted. On the right-hand side image, on the left-hand side of that circle is the before, obviously, pre-operative image. We can see the brown area is actually exposed bone. The cartilage is gone. On the right-hand side is after 48 weeks of the implantation. On the cartoon shown on the left-hand side, you can see the center of that right-hand side image showing a bright white area. That's the regenerative cartilage. So as I mentioned to you, the two components, the cell suspension and the biopolymer, gets mixed manually at the OR, and then the patient is prepared. This can be done either through arthrotomy, which is open incision surgery like on the cartoon, or it can also be done arthroscopically. But basically, the patients are exposed to that area, and then the surgical drill holes are being made on the subchondral bone, and then the cell and the hydrogel mixture is implanted there without no search or additional glue or membrane. The hydrogel actually provides enough viscosity to actually hold the cells in place, and after that, the patient needs to go through a 4 to 8 week rehabilitation where the non-weight bearing is required, so that the regeneration and remodeling of that healing is not disturbed by pressing down on the weight. So this is a really rather unique route of administration that we've developed that is in combination with the patient's own bone marrow, which is going to be bleed down from underneath, and then that's going to meet our MSCs, and then the MSCs will stimulate by doing paracrine signaling all those endogenous progenitors within the bone marrow, which is basically patient's own stem cells, and that can actually do the healing and remodeling of the bone as well as cartilage regeneration. That's what you see. So in the pivotal phase 3 trial, which we've conducted in South Korea, on the left-hand side, this is a patient, typical demographics of age group of patients suffering from knee OA in South Korea, which is not different to any other markets. And you can see on that majority of these patients in the knee OA population is really between that ages 50 to 70. And then younger than 50, there are some surgical procedures you can actually contemplate, such as microfracture. On the far right, beyond 70, 75 years of age, then you'll be recommended to the TKA, total knee arthroplasty. But the majority of these patients in that age group is really the key patient pool that requires some sort of intervention that can help them. And on the right-hand side graphs is actually demographic by age of the patients that we enrolled for our phase 3 trial in Korea, and that doesn't look very similar to our recent Japanese phase 3 trial as well, whereby it represented the market situation. The majority of the patients lies in the 50 to 70 years of age. So in that Korean trial, what we've done is we've actually used microfracture, which is just drilling along, bone marrow bleeding alone as a control. And then on the treatment arm randomized, patients received obviously the drilling, and on top of that, our cell implantation, and that's what you see on the left-hand side panel. In the middle panel, this is a regeneration versus non-regeneration bar. So you can see the red bar indicates that regeneration of cartilage occurring in any age group, all age groups across the age, and then that is the CARTISTEM, the cell-treated population. The gray bar shows the patients only receive microfracture, just the bleeding along with bone marrow. So that doesn't really regenerate well, particularly in the age groups beyond 50 to 60. Far right-hand side panel, the white graph shows a 3 to 5 year follow-up of that same patient pool with single intervention. At 1 year time point, you can see the pain and function, which is the line shows, the lower the score, the better. Then the patients with the blue bar, which is a treatment group, really stays on 3 to 5 years with that sustained improvement, pain and function with a single intervention, whereas the red bar shows the microfracture group of patients, a transient pain improvement for 1 year, but it goes back to base level. This is a very important slide. It's what shows is that at 1 year time point, when we're visually inspecting with arthroscopic second look, that's with camera, because the regeneration of cartilage or failure of cartilage regeneration cannot be determined with X-ray or MRI with not enough resolution. So the only way you can definitively tell is actually to look at the camera with arthroscopic second look, which was the endpoint for this particular trial, at which time we were actually able to do a biopsy of these patients because all the subjects thankfully consent to the biopsy. And then what that shows on the right-hand side panel is basically a microfracture versus a CARTISTEM regenerated cartilage, and the top panel shows what's known as fibrous cartilage. That's the abnormal cartilage, and the bottom layer of panels is showing a high line-like cartilage. These are basically natural cartilage you want to find in that location. Now, one of the drawbacks of microfracture is that just releasing patients' own bone marrow progenies alone leads to some regeneration in particularly younger patients and a smaller defect, but actually they make fibrous cartilage incorrect type of cartilage. So this is really a histological analysis that all the orthopedic specialists look for when we claim that we actually truly regenerate cartilage and restore that cartilage in the location with the right type of cartilage. Along with that mechanism, which is shown in the white paragraph there, really enticing the endogenous regeneration and stimulating that regardless of patient's age, because they all respond the same way as long as you provide a fresh signal by implanting our cells. At the same time, they're doing a couple of other mechanisms, which is very strong anti-inflammation, which is very important for the OA patients because highly inflamed area, as well as really decreasing the degradation of cartilage matrix, which is the top panel. So these other mechanisms that are in action in parallel to stimulating the bone marrow progenitors of patients' own cells makes up the entire dynamic mechanism, and this is a foundation of our potency marker systems that we can actually apply for our CMC also. So here are a bunch of lists of the IND studies from Korea and the US, phase 1, 2. We were able to go phase 2 straight phase 3 in the US, which will begin end of this year, early next year, with 75 sites in both United States and Canada. So watch out for that space. And then we've got one PMS study. These are all IND studies. And then we've got more than 20 now publications coming out from the field in South Korea by our users. And here's a link to all the publications. And what's really interesting that what we're doing now in parallel to all this is that what we call RWE study, the real-world evidence study. Because as I mentioned, we have close to 35,000 patients in the past 13 years. So what we've been doing in the past 2 years is that we were recalling some of these patients at about 13, 14 hospitals. And we screen about 2,500 patients and then ask for their consent. Then of those who consented, we're targeting about 500 plus patients, really bring them back into the MRI today. And they have to be more than 3 years since the treatment. So we're looking for patients with minimum 3 years of duration since their treatment and looking at today's MRI against a pre-op MRI because everybody has their baseline MRI before they decided to get this treatment. So we're looking at that and looking at for specifically, obviously, long-term safety results, but as well as the total knee conversion, total knee arthroplastic conversion. So the question really is, you get these patients in need of that particular age group, particularly who doesn't have any other option but to wait for TKA, and you get our treatment, and X number of years passed, and how long does it take until they actually go and convert into total knee arthroplasty? Until now, out of 500 patients, we look to be at less than 1%, so we're very excited to fully analyze that data and then release that data next year. And at the same time, we're doing this phase 3 trial in Japan, as I mentioned to you in the middle of this slide, where we've done a 130-patient trial, randomized 1-to-1, a single pivotal study. We're about to do our last patient out, and we're excited to announce that data early part of next year. Importantly, in that study design, also had a second-look arthroscopy to be able to assess the regeneration, presence or absence of that, and similar to what I've shown you in Korean, the phase 3 data as well. So that'll be very exciting to see. And then, as I mentioned, the phase 3 program in the United States will begin end of this year, early next year. Last slide, very quickly, we've got a strategic partnership with CCRM, and OmniaBio is a Hamilton, Ontario, Toronto, Ontario-based CGT CDMO, where we have 50% stakeholding, where we are going to be releasing our phase 3 trial material out of there. It just received a DEL from Health Canada, so we're very excited to move forward, and I'll be here to presenting that progress next year. Thank you for your attention, and here's my details if you want to reach me. Thank you.